Again, you know, the school is the microcosm of society, okay? It teaches you the same things that the rest of us are learning in the rest of society. And to me, if there's no democracy in society, there's no democracy in the school system. And I'll give you an example. This is an ongoing, by the way, to all of you young people, my daughter is 16 years old. Just like you, she has a healthy disdain for her mother. She came and told me that suddenly her school had passed a policy where you had to carry a pass in the hallways. And I'm like, why? And she's like, I don't know, we were just informed that from Thursday, this is on a Tuesday evening, she's telling me that from Thursday, you're going to carry a pass in the corridors. And you can't go out of the school without permission, etc., etc. She's in high school. She thinks she's an adult. She's been thinking that since she was born, I think. But anyway, she thinks she's an adult. So she's like, this is unheard of, this is outrageous. So of course, me being what I am, a good political mother, I called up the principal without telling my daughter. Because I'm like, if I tell her, she's going to tell me to shut up. So I'm like, no, I'm going to call up the principal. I called up the principal and left a message and said, I want to talk to you. So the principal called me thinking there is some irate woman of color, you know, I better talk to her. So she calls me up. And the principal goes, how can I help you? I'm like, well, I need to ask you something. I hear you instituting this policy of, you know, passes. Well, if an incident happened in the school, which is the reason why you are instituting this new policy, how come I don't know about it? I'm a parent, I should know about it. It regards my, you know, affects my child's safety. If no incident happened, then I'm even more concerned. Why are you doing this? And were the students informed? They have been informed now, she goes. I'm like, no, were they consulted? Were they consulted before something like this happened? My daughter is part of the student, you know, activity council or whatever. She's one of the executives. How come she doesn't know about it? She's a representative of sorts. How come none of the school representatives know about it? None of the kids know about it, and you just passed this policy. We are just doing it as an experimentation. I'm like, that's fine, but can you tell me something? My daughter will probably not get into trouble, or maybe she will, who knows? All mothers think their children never do anything wrong. And they are the ones who turned out to be the worst kids. But according to the school, that is. So I'm like, my daughter will probably never get into trouble on this policy. But how do I tell her the difference between social responsibility and persecution? Just explain to me. How do I tell her that she's not being persecuted because you have the power to screw her and therefore you are screwing her? And she's like, we're not doing that. I said, no, you are. You just passed a policy without informing any of the kids, without participating, having them participate. Here I am in my household trying desperately, even though I'm a Muslim and South Asian and I'm supposed to oppress and, you know, treat my children really badly. You do know that. All South Asian parents do that. I'm a Muslim and a South Asian. I'm supposed to oppress and suppress my children. But I'm going against the grain and I'm actually trying to teach them democracy and I'm trying to teach them social responsibility. So now you tell me you've just gone and completely destroyed my message. And I'm like, my child's biggest concern right now is how come the kids were not consulted? How come the high school, they're high school kids. So we are going to tell these kids tomorrow to go into society and be democratically, you know, and to be Democrats and to be socially responsible. But we've got to start that in the school system, and I think kids have to demand it, like, you know, in a democratic manner. Like I was saying to my daughter, why don't you have a delegation that goes to your principal's office? And she looked at me and she said, you gotta be kidding me. Are you insane? Kids don't do delegations, but maybe that is something they should do. I think kids have every right. School is their domain. They have every right, for instance, to go as a delegation to the principal's office and demand an explanation and say, how come we are not participating? We would like to participate. We would like all such decisions that affect us in such an integral manner to have our input into it. I think that's what these young leaders of tomorrow have to do. They have to start in the school system. Now, I'm not saying that you know, Like I was telling my daughter, you don't, I mean, she was freaked out because the principal said, let's you and me go and have coffee together. So I told my daughter, I'm like, I'm coming to your school to take your principal out for a coffee. And she's like, I don't know you, I don't want to know you, don't dare tell her what my name is. I'm like, no, that's okay, your surname and mine are different, so she doesn't know who you are and who I am. And she's like, just keep it that way, just keep it that way. It's so freaky, it's so freaky. My principal is going to have coffee with my mom. This is scary, I don't want to be part of it. I understand that. But the point still remains that I was the conduit through which this conversation had to take place. However, I think my child, and I think all of these young people in the school system, have an absolute right and should begin to participate, because I think that's where the conversations will happen vis-a-vis you know, what they do once they come out of the school. And I give you one other example. We had a program at my organization when I was at CASA, Council of Agencies Serving South Asians, where, you know, we were dealing a lot with the immigrant professionals and tradespeople who are not getting skills commensurate employment. So we were organizing doctors and engineers and pharmacists and, you know, electricians, etc., whatever. So we started a program where we got their children engaged in some of our advocacy work, so that the young kids could actually become advocates for access to professions and trades for their parents. We thought it was a good idea, A, for them to learn what their parents are going through and not sort of look down upon them or, you know, start to sort of diminish, somehow, not to diminish their parents' lack of achievement, because it's not because of them, it's because of societal barriers. But B, to actually be active in doing something, right? Like making policy submissions and all of those things. That was a good program. We started with high school, but a lot of the kids who got involved were university kids, unfortunately, because they were a little more mature, right? But nevertheless, I think those are the kinds, I think the kids have to be, they can get engaged very early on. The problem is that they are very up on their rights. Is the other part of it, which is the obligation part of it, that also has to come into the discourse. But not at the expense of, you know, the school becoming into a war zone. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can have a perfectly, you know, I think teachers have to play a role there too. I think teachers have to be more active. I think administrators have to think differently. Like not, you know, one of the things I was suggesting is that school is based in a neighborhood, which is where the parents live. The teachers and the administrators don't necessarily live in that area. They come from outside. They have to think of themselves as guests in that community. But that's not the way how it works. The school creates its own policies to keep the parents out, as opposed to the parents acting as hosts in that community and the principals and the teachers and the administrators participating in that community and the school being the hub of it. See, it's also how we locate ourselves within that power dynamics. If you're a newcomer, believe me, the first point of contact to mainstream society is the school. That's where your kids go. Before you learn anything, before you even learn how to take a bus, before you find out about the nearest grocery store, you find out about the school. And school is the furthest away from an immigrant parent's life, because it's not engaged. That's not where parents get engaged. Parents are called, I used to be called into school to make cookies. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've never made a cookie in my life. Betty Crocker makes cookies, not me. And I sure as hell don't make samosas. I buy them. So I'm like, you know, you want me to come into the school? I'm not interested in baking cookies. I'm interested in whether your curriculum is anti-racist or not. But then I became a problem, so the student council didn't want me. Believe me, I wasn't threatening at all. I was being very polite. But really,